Kate demands to see guards
I know this is
report.
difficult.
What he witnessed
You
with
must
Charlotte
trust me.
changes everything.
We don't have much
Everyone
time
around
before
her
they
seemed to
arrive.
have their own opinions about what had happened that night. But Kate didn't trust the whispers, the office gossip, or the hurried explanations offered by those in charge. Something about the way things had unfolded just didn't sit right with her. She couldn't explain it fully, but a knot of unease had settled deep in her stomach, growing tighter with every passing hour. From the moment she walked into the building that morning, Kate felt the tension hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Even the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above seemed to buzz with uncertainty. People glanced at her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, as if they expected her to explode or demand answers on the spot. She didn't blame them. Kate had earned a reputation for being persistent, the kind of person who refused to let things slide when she sensed injustice. But today, she was more determined than ever. She made her way to the administrative office, her steps purposeful and deliberate. The receptionist offered her a polite smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Kate returned it with a nod and walked past the rows of cubicles, each occupied by someone busy in their own little world. Some glanced up as she passed, noticing the intensity in her gaze. She didn't slow down, didn't falter. She had a mission and nothing was going to distract her from it. When she reached the office of the facility manager, she knocked firmly on the door. "Come in," called a voice. Kate opened the door and stepped inside, closing it behind her. The manager, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor, looked up from her paperwork. "Kate," she said, her tone measured, "what brings you here this early?" Kate didn't waste time with small talk. She took a deep breath and said, "I want to see the security guard's report from the night of the incident. Everything that was written down, every observation. I need to know what really happened." The manager's expression changed subtly. There was a flicker of hesitation, as if she had expected Kate to come, but not with such directness. "Kate, the report is sensitive," she replied carefully. "It's not something we just hand over. There are procedures, you know that." Kate's jaw tightened, but she didn't raise her voice. She had learned long ago that patience could be more powerful than anger. "I understand that, but I'm asking formally. I have the right to see it, and I want it today," she said, her tone firm but respectful. For a moment, the manager seemed to weigh her options. She looked at Kate, then at the stack of papers on her desk, and finally back at Kate again. "I can't just give it to you right now," she said slowly. "You'll need to fill out a request form, and it will have to go through the proper channels. It might take a few days." Kate's heart sank slightly, but she refused to show it. She leaned forward just a little, her eyes steady on the manager. "I can wait a few days," she said calmly, "but I need assurance that it will be approved. I need to know that someone is taking this seriously. What happened that night isn't just office drama, it affects people's safety and trust. I need to see the truth." The manager sighed and leaned back in her chair, folding her hands together. "I understand, Kate, I really do, but you have to understand our position too. The guard's report is his official account, and it's important that it's handled carefully. There are rules." Kate nodded, taking in the explanation. She didn't want to argue, not yet. She knew that pressing too hard at this moment could backfire, but she also knew she couldn't leave without some kind of commitment. "Then help me make sure it goes through," she said. "I'm willing to follow the rules, but I need to know it's being treated with the urgency it deserves." The manager studied her for a moment, then finally said, "All right, I'll make a note of it personally. I can't promise it will be immediate, but I'll make sure it's prioritized." Relief washed over Kate, but only slightly. She knew that even with this small victory, the real work was just beginning. She thanked the manager, left the office, and walked down the hallway with a sense of cautious optimism. People continued to watch her as she passed, whispering softly among themselves. Kate didn't care. She was used to being the center of attention in situations like this. As she made her way back to her desk, she thought about the night in question. The incident had been brief but alarming, a moment of chaos that seemed to ripple outward, affecting everyone in the building. People had seen parts of it, heard parts of it, but no one had the full picture. Kate was determined to find it. She wanted to know what really happened, not what others assumed had happened, and certainly not what office gossip suggested. Her mind drifted to Charlotte, the other person involved in the incident. Kate had always found Charlotte a bit mysterious, someone who seemed confident but private at the same time. No one really knew her well, and Kate suspected that many of the rumors were based on assumptions rather than facts. She wanted to see the truth for herself. That was why the security guard's report was so crucial. It was unfiltered, factual, and written in real time by someone who had observed everything without bias. Kate returned to her office and sat down, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk as she tried to focus on other tasks. But her thoughts kept returning to the report. She imagined the pages filled with careful notes. Who was where, what they said, what they did. She pictured the security guard watching quietly, noticing details that everyone else missed. She felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The truth could change everything, not just her understanding of the incident, but the way people saw Charlotte, herself, and the facility as a whole. Hours passed, and the office carried on with its usual rhythm. Phones rang, computers hummed, and the occasional laugh echoed down the hall. But Kate felt separate from it all, as if she were on the edge of something significant. She couldn't shake the feeling that the events of that night had left a hidden trail, waiting for someone determined enough to follow it. And she intended to be that someone. By late afternoon, Kate decided to take a short walk. She needed to clear her mind and gather her thoughts. The crisp air outside helped, and as she walked through the quiet streets, she replayed everything she had seen and heard since the incident. Small details she had initially overlooked began to stand out, like puzzle pieces that might fit together once she had all the information. Kate knew that patience was important, but she also knew the value of persistence. She had spent her life learning that waiting and watching could only take you so far. Sometimes, you had to act, ask questions, and insist on answers. That's exactly what she planned to do. The security guard's report was not just a document. It was a key to understanding a story that had been hidden in plain sight, and Kate was ready to unlock it. As she returned to the building, Kate felt a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't know exactly what the report would reveal, but she knew that finding out was worth every moment of effort. Whatever truths lay inside those pages, about Charlotte, the night of the incident, or the people who had witnessed it, Kate was determined to face them head-on. She knew it wouldn't be easy, the truth rarely was, but she was ready for the challenge. By the time she sat back at her desk, the office had started to empty for the day. The fading sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Kate opened her notebook and began jotting down everything she remembered, every detail that seemed significant. She made a list of questions she wanted answered and thoughts she needed to clarify. For the first time since the incident, Kate felt a small sense of calm. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least she had taken the first step. She had made her demand known, asserted her right to see the truth, and set the wheels in motion. Now all she could do was wait, and prepare herself for whatever revelations were waiting in the guard's report. And deep down, she knew that once she read it, nothing would ever be quite the same again. Daniel, the security guard on duty that night, sat in his small, dimly lit office, staring at the logbook in front of him. The facility was quiet now, empty halls echoing only the distant hum of air conditioning. On the night of the incident, everything had seemed normal at first. People had come and gone, routine checks had been completed, and the usual sounds of a busy workplace had filled the air. But then something shifted. Daniel remembered the exact moment it had happened. It was late, almost at the edge of his shift, when a subtle disturbance caught his attention. A noise, a movement, something out of place, and his instincts told him to watch more closely. He had trained for years to notice the smallest inconsistencies, and that night, those instincts had not failed him. Charlotte had been there, moving through the hallways with a kind of quiet purpose. She didn't shout or create a scene, but her presence was noticeable in a way that made the air seem heavier. Daniel watched her carefully, recording every detail in his mind, and later on paper. He had a responsibility to be observant, to document, to provide an accurate account. But the longer he observed, the more conflicted he felt. What he saw was not something easily explained, and he knew it could change the way people thought about what had happened. He remembered the way Charlotte had paused by the reception desk, looking around as if trying to make sure no one was watching too closely. Daniel had seen her interactions with others, brief, subtle gestures, whispered words that only she and a few others would understand. It was the kind of detail that would seem insignificant to most people, but to him, it carried weight. It was these small moments that made the night unusual, and he noted every single one in his report. Daniel prided himself on accuracy. Every movement, every expression, every conversation he could hear was documented. He knew that someday someone might read his words, trying to piece together the truth. And he had no desire to mislead anyone. He didn't take sides, nor did he want to. His goal was simple: observe, record, and report. Yet, even in his neutrality, he felt the burden of knowing that his notes might carry consequences for the people involved. As he wrote, Daniel thought about Kate. He had seen her asking questions, demanding information, and he knew that she would eventually want to see his report. He could imagine the look on her face when she read it, the mixture of anticipation, frustration, and determination. Daniel had always respected people who sought the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. He had no doubt that Kate would handle the facts carefully, even if what she discovered would shake her assumptions. He remembered one particularly tense moment that night. Charlotte had approached the storage area near the back of the building. Daniel noticed that she seemed unusually cautious, almost as if she was aware of being observed. She didn't speak loudly or make any noticeable moves, but there was something in the way she carried herself that made Daniel pause. He took careful note of it, writing down every observable detail. The time, her gestures, the way she glanced around, and even her breathing, which he could hear faintly as he stayed hidden in the shadows. The rest of the night passed with a series of small, unusual events. People moved through the facility, some oblivious, others whispering in corners. Daniel watched them all, recording the sequence of events with a meticulous hand. What struck him most, however, was the way Charlotte interacted with the environment around her. She seemed to be looking for something, yet also careful not to disturb anything unnecessarily. To Daniel, it was clear that there was more to the night than a simple disruption. He remembered a moment when he had considered stepping in, interrupting the scene to prevent any confusion or conflict. But he hesitated. His role was to observe, not to intervene. The tension in the air suggested that even a single misstep could escalate matters beyond control. So he stayed back, continuing his watch, all the while feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. By the time the night ended, Daniel had filled several pages with observations. Every interaction, every gesture, every unusual noise had been recorded with precision. He had rewritten some entries multiple times, ensuring clarity and accuracy. Even the smallest details, which others might dismiss as irrelevant, were included. For Daniel, those details mattered. They could reveal the truth, even if no one noticed them at the time. When Daniel finally handed the report to the administration the next day, he felt a sense of quiet relief. His duty was complete, but he knew the document carried power. In the wrong hands, it could cause misunderstandings. In the right hands, it could illuminate the truth. He hoped it would be the latter. As the days passed, Daniel continued his routine, but his mind often returned to that night. He thought about Charlotte, about her careful movements and subtle actions. He thought about the reactions of the people who had been present, about the tension in the air, and about how easy it would have been for anyone to misinterpret what they saw. He understood that truth was rarely simple, and that people often assumed they knew more than they actually did. Daniel also considered Kate's determination. He had seen her persistence firsthand, the way she refused to be deterred by hesitation or bureaucracy. He suspected she would eventually see the report, and he wondered how she would react. Would she be shocked, relieved, angry, or a mixture of all three? He didn't know, but he respected her willingness to confront reality head-on. In quiet moments, Daniel reflected on his own role in the events. He had observed without judgment, recorded without bias, and yet he couldn't deny that his notes could shape the outcome for others. The responsibility weighed on him, but he accepted it. He had always believed that truth was more important than comfort, and that documenting events accurately was a way to honor reality. The facility itself had returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of that night lingered in Daniel's mind. The empty halls, the faint sounds of machinery, the quiet spaces where Charlotte had moved, all of it stayed with him, a reminder that ordinary nights could contain extraordinary details if someone paid close enough attention. When Kate finally requested the report, Daniel felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. He had done his duty, but he also knew that revealing the full picture could be difficult for some to accept. People often assumed that events were straightforward, when in reality they were rarely so simple. The subtle details he had recorded, the glances, the gestures, the quiet interactions, could shift perceptions entirely. Daniel had always believed that observation was a form of respect. By noticing the little things, by recording them carefully, he honored the complexity of human behavior. That night, and the report he had written afterward, were his way of acknowledging that complexity. It wasn't about blame or judgment or taking sides. It was about truth and the responsibility of being a witness. Even as he carried on with his regular duties, Daniel felt the weight of the report lingering in his mind. The document was no longer just a set of notes. It was a story, a detailed account of what had actually happened, written with care and attention. He hoped that when Kate read it, she would see what he had seen, understand what he had observed, and appreciate the subtle truths hidden within the ordinary events of that night. And so Daniel waited quietly, knowing that soon the report would leave his hands and enter the world outside his office. He couldn't control how it would be received, nor could he predict the reactions it would provoke, but he had done his part. He had observed, recorded, and remained faithful to the truth as he had witnessed it. He leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. The night had passed, the events were behind him, but the story remained alive in the pages of the report. Daniel knew that the impact of those observations was only beginning. Someone, he hoped, would read it with the care and attention it deserved. Someone, he hoped, would understand that the truth was more than what appeared on the surface. For Daniel, the responsibility of witnessing was both a burden and an honor. He had seen things others had overlooked. He had noted actions that could be easily misunderstood. And he had recorded everything with painstaking accuracy, knowing that someday, someone like Kate would demand the truth. When that day came, he hoped the report would speak clearly, illuminating the events of that night in a way that words alone could convey. He glanced at the clock. Another quiet night had begun in the facility, the hum of machinery filling the empty halls. Daniel returned to his logbook, reviewing the notes one last time. Each page reflected the night in detail, capturing what he had witnessed with Charlotte and others. It was more than a record, it was a testament, a story of observation, patience, and care. And somewhere, Daniel knew, Kate was waiting for this story, ready to uncover the truths hidden within the lines of his report. When the envelope finally arrived on Kate's desk, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The security guard's report she had been waiting for so long was now in her hands, and she knew that opening it could change everything. She looked around her office, making sure no one was watching, and carefully slid the papers out. The folder was thick, filled with detailed notes, timestamps, and observations. Her heart beat faster as she began to read. The first few pages were straightforward, routine checks, normal activities, and ordinary movements of staff and visitors. But as she continued, the notes began to shift. Daniel, the security guard, had recorded subtle details, moments that had seemed small at the time but now felt significant. Kate leaned closer, reading each word carefully, trying to picture the scene in her mind. Every observation added a new layer of understanding, like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. She reached the part describing Charlotte. Kate's eyes widened as she read Daniel's account. Unlike the rumors that had circulated, Charlotte had not been careless, or disruptive. In fact, she had acted with precision, awareness, and a quiet confidence that Daniel had noted repeatedly. Each movement, glance, and interaction was documented meticulously, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Kate realized that her previous assumptions were incomplete. The situation was far more complex than she had imagined. One entry caught her attention in particular. Daniel had described Charlotte pausing by the supply room, looking around carefully before retrieving a folder and placing it somewhere safe. The observation seemed minor at first, but Kate understood its significance. It wasn't just about the folder. It was about intent, careful planning, and awareness of her surroundings. Charlotte had been mindful of the environment and the people around her, acting with deliberate caution. Kate felt a pang of admiration mixed with surprise. The narrative she had imagined in her head did not match the reality of Charlotte's actions. As she turned the pages, Kate noticed that Daniel had included his own reflections in a neutral tone. He hadn't judged Charlotte, nor had he tried to interpret her motives beyond what he observed. Instead, he had allowed the facts to speak for themselves. Kate felt the weight of responsibility that came with reading such a report. The details were not just interesting, they were powerful. They could alter opinions, clarify misunderstandings, and reveal truths that had remained hidden. Kate paused for a moment and leaned back in her chair. She thought about all the assumptions people had made, the rumors that had spread, and the quick judgments that had been passed. So many people had formed opinions without knowing the full story. Now, with Daniel's report, she had the chance to see the events through the eyes of someone who had truly observed them, and what she saw was far different from what she had expected. One section of the report described Charlotte's interactions with others that night. Daniel had noted subtle exchanges, brief conversations, reassuring gestures, and moments of quiet support. Kate realized that Charlotte had not only been aware of her own actions, but also attentive to the needs and concerns of those around her. She had acted thoughtfully, carefully navigating the situation without drawing unnecessary attention. Kate had never expected to see this side of Charlotte, and it changed everything she thought she knew. The more Kate read, the more she began to question her own assumptions. She had approached the report expecting confirmation of the rumors, expecting to see mistakes or carelessness. Instead, she found a different story, a story of composure, awareness, and intelligence. It made her reconsider not only Charlotte's actions but also her own judgments. Kate felt a mix of humility and respect. Sometimes the truth was far more nuanced than she was prepared to accept. As she continued, Kate noticed a pattern in Daniel's observations. Charlotte's movements were deliberate, almost like a carefully choreographed routine. She was aware of the timing, of the people nearby, and of potential consequences. Daniel had recorded each step, showing how Charlotte navigated challenges without confrontation, without panic, and without drawing unnecessary attention. Kate realized that what had seemed like small, ordinary actions were actually significant decisions made under pressure. A particular moment described in the report made Kate's chest tighten. Charlotte had encountered a coworker who seemed confused and anxious. Instead of ignoring the person or brushing them off, Charlotte had offered a quiet explanation, a gesture of reassurance, and moved on without causing disruption. Daniel had noted the exact words, the tone of voice, and the response from the coworker. Kate understood the subtle power of this interaction. It revealed Charlotte's thoughtfulness and awareness, qualities that had gone unnoticed by everyone else. Kate read on, fascinated by the level of detail in Daniel's report. Each page seemed to challenge her previous assumptions, forcing her to see Charlotte in a new light. It was a reminder that perception often differed from reality. The human tendency to judge quickly, to rely on incomplete information, could lead to misunderstanding and misinterpretation. Kate realized that Daniel's careful observations were more than just a report. They were a lesson in seeing things as they truly were, without bias or preconception. By the time she reached the end of the report, Kate felt a mix of emotions, relief, admiration, and a little disbelief. The night of the incident had been complicated, filled with tension and uncertainty, but Charlotte had navigated it with skill and care. Kate understood now why Daniel had taken such care in writing his notes. He had witnessed something extraordinary in the quietest of ways, something that could easily be overlooked by anyone not paying close attention. Kate leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. She thought about the impact of this knowledge. How would it change the way people saw Charlotte? How would it influence her own actions moving forward? Kate knew that the truth was not just about facts. It was about perspective, understanding, and the courage to look beyond appearances. The report had revealed a reality that was richer, more detailed, and more complex than any rumor or speculation. She closed the folder for a moment and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The persistence, the insistence on seeing the truth, and the careful attention to detail had all led to this moment. Kate realized that the pursuit of truth was not always comfortable, and it often challenged existing beliefs. But it was necessary. The report had given her clarity, and with clarity came responsibility, the responsibility to act with fairness, understanding, and honesty. Kate reopened the folder and read through some of her favorite passages again, paying attention to the nuances she had missed the first time. Each detail reinforced the complexity of the events and the thoughtfulness of Charlotte's actions. She felt a sense of gratitude toward Daniel for his careful observations, understanding that without his diligence, much of the truth might have remained hidden. As the day turned into evening, Kate made a decision. She would use this knowledge wisely, sharing it carefully and thoughtfully. She would not spread gossip or make judgments based on incomplete information. Instead, she would allow the facts, documented in the report, to guide her understanding. Kate knew that truth had the power to heal, clarify, and inspire, but only when treated with care. Before leaving the office, Kate took one last look at the report. She carefully placed it back in the folder and set it on her desk. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, not because she had uncovered a scandal or found fault, but because she had seen the truth fully and clearly without distortion. Kate understood that real understanding required patience, observation, and the willingness to challenge one's assumptions. Walking home that evening, Kate felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of that night, the observations in the report, and the careful documentation by Daniel had all given her a new perspective. She realized that people were often more capable, more thoughtful, and more complex than they appeared. And sometimes, the truth required someone willing to look closely, to listen carefully, and to understand deeply. By the time she reached her apartment, Kate knew that her life, her understanding of Charlotte, and her view of the facility would never be quite the same. The report had changed everything, not by creating drama or conflict, but by revealing reality in its truest form. Kate felt a mixture of respect, curiosity, and determination. She would carry the lessons of this report forward, applying them not just to this incident, but to all situations where assumptions threatened to overshadow truth. Sitting at her kitchen table, Kate opened a notebook and began to write her thoughts. She recorded her reactions, her insights, and the new understanding she had gained. It was a way to process the information and ensure she remembered the subtleties she had learned. Each word she wrote reinforced the clarity and depth of her perception. For Kate, the report was more than just a document. It was a revelation. It showed her that truth was not always what it seemed, that actions often carried hidden meaning, and that careful observation could reveal layers of understanding invisible to most. She knew that when she finally discussed the incident with others, she would do so with empathy, precision, and respect for the complexity of human behavior. By the end of the night, Kate felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced the report with an open mind, embraced the unexpected truths it revealed, and allowed herself to grow from the experience. The night of the incident, once confusing and unsettling, now held lessons, clarity, and understanding. Kate knew that this was only the beginning of a deeper journey, not just into the events of that night, but into the ways in which perception, observation, and truth shaped the lives of those around her. After absorbing the contents of Daniel's report, Kate returned to the facility. The next day with a new perspective. The truth she had uncovered was powerful, and she knew that it couldn't remain hidden. She needed to address it carefully but also decisively. As she walked through the familiar hallways, she noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. People glanced her way, whispers followed her steps, and the tension from before seemed to have thickened. Kate's first stop was the administration office. The manager looked up as she entered, a mix of curiosity and caution on her face. "Kate, you've had the report," she said softly. "What do you think?" Kate held the folder firmly in her hands. "It's more detailed than I expected," she replied. "And it shows things that people haven't seen or understood. Charlotte's actions that night were deliberate, careful, and considerate, not what the rumors suggested." The manager leaned back in her chair, absorbing Kate's words. "I've been worried about how this will affect everyone," she admitted. "Some people have already formed opinions and they might not take kindly to corrections." Kate nodded. She had anticipated resistance. Truth rarely traveled smoothly, especially when it challenged established perceptions. "I understand," she said, "but the truth needs to be known. Misunderstandings can't continue to shape decisions, actions, or reputations. This report changes the way we should see that night, and the way we should see Charlotte." With the manager's cautious support, Kate began reaching out to colleagues who had been present during the incident. She approached each conversation with care, sharing the facts documented by Daniel, rather than expressing personal judgment. She emphasized that the report was an objective account and that it revealed a level of thoughtfulness and composure that had been overlooked. The reactions were varied. Some colleagues were surprised, realizing that their previous assumptions had been incorrect. Others were hesitant, reluctant to accept the new information because it conflicted with what they had believed for weeks. And a few resisted openly, dismissing the report as over-detailed or irrelevant. Kate listened to each response carefully, responding with patience and clarity, ensuring that the focus remained on understanding rather than conflict. Word began to spread, quietly at first, then more broadly, about the revelations in Daniel's report. The office atmosphere started to shift. Where gossip and speculation had once dominated, conversations now included the careful observations recorded by the security guard. Kate's role in bringing the report to light was subtle but effective. She didn't force people to accept the truth, but she provided a clear, undeniable account for them to consider. Charlotte herself noticed the change. She had sensed the tension building after the incident, aware that her actions had been misinterpreted. Yet she had remained professional, focused on her work, and cautious in her interactions. Now, with the report circulating, Charlotte began to see a shift in how people treated her. There was a growing recognition of her careful and deliberate behavior, and a newfound respect that had been absent before. Kate observed this transformation quietly. She saw the relief in Charlotte's expression when a colleague thanked her for clarifying the situation, and the subtle smiles exchanged when someone acknowledged the report's accuracy. Kate felt a sense of satisfaction. This was the result she had hoped for. The truth had not only clarified events, but had also begun to restore trust and understanding among her peers. But the process was not without its challenges. Some individuals clung stubbornly to their original perceptions, unwilling to adjust their views. Kate encountered resistance in meetings, subtle disagreements, and moments of tension where old assumptions surfaced despite the facts. She addressed each instance calmly, pointing back to the report, encouraging reflection rather than argument. Slowly, the patterns began to shift, as the evidence spoke for itself more loudly than opinion ever could. The ripple effect extended beyond the immediate participants. Supervisors and managers began reconsidering their evaluations of the night, questioning prior judgments, and taking steps to ensure future incidents would be observed and documented with equal care. Kate's insistence on clarity and transparency had not only affected perceptions, but had also influenced policies and practices, highlighting the importance of accurate observation and reporting. For Charlotte, the experience was transformative. She had endured weeks of misunderstanding and subtle criticism, but now, with Daniel's report vindicating her careful actions, she began to feel a sense of validation. It wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about being recognized for the thoughtfulness and composure she had shown under pressure. Charlotte's confidence grew, and she began to engage more openly with colleagues, no longer feeling the need to guard against misinterpretation at every turn. Kate's own growth was significant as well. She had approached the situation seeking answers, but what she discovered extended beyond facts. She learned the power of patience, the importance of observation, and the value of presenting truth carefully and respectfully. The experience reinforced her belief that transparency and understanding were essential in any environment, particularly when misunderstandings could damage reputations and relationships. As the days passed, the office gradually settled into a new rhythm. The incident was no longer a source of tension, but a case study in careful observation and thoughtful response. Daniel's report, once a private document, had become a tool for learning and reflection. Kate had facilitated this change, guiding her colleagues toward a deeper understanding of the night's events and the people involved. The final moments of resolution came when the administration formally acknowledged the report and its findings. A meeting was held to review Daniel's observations, with an emphasis on clarity, fairness, and transparency. Kate presented the key points, highlighting Charlotte's deliberate and thoughtful actions, while ensuring the discussion remained respectful and objective. The acknowledgement reinforced the lessons learned and established a precedent for how future incidents would be documented and addressed. In the weeks that followed, the relationships within the office strengthened. Misunderstandings gave way to respect, and speculation was replaced with observation and fact. Kate observed subtle changes. Colleagues approached each other with greater care. Conversations included more thoughtful reflection, and the office environment felt lighter and more cooperative. The ripple effect of Daniel's meticulous reporting, combined with Kate's persistence in bringing the truth to light, had transformed not just perceptions but the culture itself. Kate reflected on the journey with a sense of quiet pride. She had demanded answers, confronted assumptions, and ensured that the truth was recognized. The process had not been easy, but the outcome had been rewarding. She understood that clarity and understanding were ongoing responsibilities, requiring vigilance, patience, and the courage to confront assumptions without fear. Charlotte, too, carried lessons from the experience. She had learned that even careful actions could be misinterpreted, but she had also seen the value of being observed accurately. She respected the diligence of Daniel's reporting and the thoughtful persistence of Kate's efforts to bring it to light. The incident had revealed strengths she hadn't fully recognized in herself, and had shown the importance of transparency in maintaining trust and integrity. Ultimately, the ripple effects of that night extended far beyond the immediate incident. The report served as a reminder that careful observation, documentation, and honest reflection could transform not only perceptions, but the very culture of an environment. Kate and Charlotte, through different roles and perspectives, had contributed to a positive change, one that emphasized truth, respect, and understanding over assumption and gossip. By the time the weeks passed, the office had moved on from the tension that had once hung so heavily in the air. Yet the lessons of that night remained. Kate, Charlotte, and Daniel had all played their parts in ensuring that the events were seen clearly, understood fully, and respected properly. The incident was no longer a source of anxiety or confusion, but a story of observation, courage, and the transformative power of truth. Kate knew that this experience would stay with her. It was a reminder that patience, persistence, and careful attention to detail could reveal truths that were otherwise hidden. It reinforced the belief that understanding others required effort, empathy, and a willingness to challenge one's own assumptions. The ripple effect of one night, one report, and one determined pursuit of truth had created lasting change, not through conflict, but through clarity and integrity. The weeks following the revelation of Daniel's report brought a sense of calm and clarity to the facility. The tension that had once filled the hallways gradually eased, replaced by understanding and respect. Kate often reflected on the events, considering not only what had happened, but also the lessons she had learned. The experience had changed her perspective in ways she hadn't anticipated. She realized that truth was rarely simple, and that understanding it fully required patience, observation, and an open mind. Kate continued to interact with her colleagues, noticing the subtle but meaningful changes in behavior. Conversations were more thoughtful, and people were more careful not to jump to conclusions. Where gossip had once dominated, clarity and transparency began to take precedence. Kate felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing this shift, knowing that her insistence on accessing the report had contributed to a healthier environment. Charlotte, too, experienced a transformation. The vindication brought by Daniel's meticulous documentation gave her a sense of confidence she had not felt since the incident. The acknowledgement of her deliberate and careful actions helped her see her own strengths more clearly. No longer burdened by the weight of misunderstanding, Charlotte began to engage more openly with her colleagues, building relationships on trust and mutual respect. Kate often reflected on Charlotte's behavior during the incident. She realized that the woman's composure and awareness had been remarkable, especially under pressure. The report had revealed a side of Charlotte that few had noticed, a combination of thoughtfulness, intelligence, and quiet strength. Kate admired her more than ever, understanding that actions often spoke louder than words, and that true character could reveal itself in the smallest of gestures. Daniel, meanwhile, continued his duties with the same dedication he had shown that night. Yet he carried a sense of pride, knowing that his careful observation had made a difference. He had remained neutral, recording facts without judgment, yet the impact of his report was profound. It had clarified misunderstandings, shifted perceptions, and even influenced the office culture. Daniel understood that his role as a witness was both a responsibility and a privilege, and he felt content knowing he had honored it faithfully. As the facility returned to its usual rhythm, Kate and Charlotte found themselves reflecting together on the lessons of the incident. They discussed the importance of observation, careful communication, and empathy. Both recognized that misjudgments could happen easily when people relied on assumptions rather than facts. Their conversations were thoughtful, filled with insights gained from experience, and strengthened the bond between them. Kate also thought about the ripple effect beyond the immediate office environment. The incident and the report had influenced policies, reminding everyone of the importance of careful documentation and respectful interaction. Supervisors began emphasizing observation and accountability, ensuring that future situations would be handled with the same clarity and fairness. Kate realized that a single act of persistence, her insistence on seeing the report, had contributed to meaningful, lasting change. The experience left Kate with a deep sense of responsibility. She understood that truth could be uncomfortable and that revealing it required courage. Yet she also knew that the pursuit of clarity was necessary, not just for herself, but for everyone affected by the events. Kate carried this awareness into her daily life, striving to approach situations with patience, attentiveness, and an open mind. Charlotte, in turn, found strength in knowing that her careful actions were seen and understood. The validation she received from the report and the acknowledgement of her colleagues reinforced her confidence. She became more proactive in supporting others, offering guidance and assistance where she could, and modeling the thoughtful, deliberate approach that had defined her behavior during the incident. Together, Kate, Charlotte, and Daniel became examples of how observation, integrity, and perseverance could create positive change. Kate's insistence on seeing the truth, Charlotte's careful actions, and Daniel's meticulous documentation had intertwined to produce a story of clarity, respect, and understanding. It was a reminder that even ordinary people, in ordinary circumstances, could have extraordinary impacts through diligence and honesty. Kate often reflected on the moments when assumptions had threatened to overshadow reality. She realized how easy it was for misunderstandings to grow when details were overlooked and facts were ignored. The experience taught her that clarity often required effort, careful attention, documentation, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. She felt grateful for the lessons learned and determined to apply them in all areas of her life. Charlotte, too, became more aware of the power of perception. She understood that even deliberate, thoughtful actions could be misinterpreted if observed incompletely. The validation from the report allowed her to move forward with confidence, but it also reinforced the importance of clear communication and transparency. Charlotte's growth was subtle but significant, reflecting the ways in which understanding and acknowledgement could influence behavior and relationships. For Daniel, the experience was a confirmation of the value of careful observation. His work, often unnoticed, had contributed to a broader understanding and had influenced the office culture in meaningful ways. He felt satisfied knowing that his diligence had been recognized and that the truth he had documented had helped correct misunderstandings. Daniel's role as an observer reminded him that even quiet actions could have lasting impact. As the facility settled into its routine, Kate found moments of reflection. She thought about the journey from uncertainty to clarity, from rumor to fact. The incident had tested patience, resilience, and judgment, but it had also demonstrated the importance of persistence, integrity, and careful observation. Kate knew that the lessons of the night would remain with her, shaping her approach to challenges and interactions in the future. The experience also reinforced the importance of collaboration and respect. Kate, Charlotte, and Daniel had each played unique roles, but together, their actions had produced understanding and clarity. Kate realized that progress often depended on the willingness of multiple people to act with integrity, to communicate honestly, and to observe carefully. The story of the incident became a lesson not only for them, but for everyone in the facility. Kate often shared her reflections with trusted colleagues, emphasizing the value of understanding, empathy, and careful observation. She encouraged others to look beyond assumptions, to seek clarity, and to recognize the complexity of human behavior. Her approach inspired subtle changes in the way people interacted, fostering an environment where facts and understanding were prioritized over gossip and speculation. Charlotte, now more confident, also contributed to this positive shift. She engaged in mentoring, supporting new staff, and modeling the thoughtful, deliberate behavior that had defined her actions during the incident. Her example encouraged others to consider the impact of their actions, to communicate clearly, and to respect the observations and perspectives of others. Together, Kate, Charlotte, and Daniel had created a lasting influence on the facility's culture. The incident, once a source of tension and misunderstanding, became a story of learning, growth, and integrity. Each of them had learned valuable lessons, Kate about persistence and seeking truth, Charlotte about validation and self-awareness, and Daniel about the quiet power of observation and documentation. As time passed, the memory of the incident remained, but it was no longer a source of anxiety or conflict. Instead, it served as a reminder of the importance of clarity, honesty, and respect. Kate often reflected on the journey and felt a sense of accomplishment, not for personal gain, but for the positive change that had been achieved. She understood that the pursuit of truth was an ongoing responsibility, requiring vigilance, patience, and courage. Charlotte, too, carried the lessons forward. She approached her work with renewed confidence, aware of the value of careful, deliberate actions and the importance of being observed and understood accurately. The experience strengthened her relationships and reinforced her belief in the power of clarity and integrity. Daniel continued his work quietly but with a sense of pride. His meticulous documentation had proven its value, demonstrating how careful observation could influence understanding and behavior. He remained committed to his role, knowing that even ordinary duties performed with diligence and integrity could have extraordinary consequences. In the end, the incident that had caused so much uncertainty and tension became a story of growth and understanding. Kate's determination, Charlotte's careful actions, and Daniel's thorough observations combined to create a positive transformation. The experience reinforced the importance of seeking truth, observing carefully, and approaching situations with empathy and patience. Kate often thought about the ripple effects of the report. The changes in the facility, the shifts in perception, and the lessons learned extended far beyond the night of the incident. She realized that truth, when pursued with integrity and shared thoughtfully, could inspire understanding and positive change in ways that gossip or assumptions never could. As she closed her notebook at the end of another long day, Kate felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had sought clarity, faced assumptions, and helped reveal a story that had been hidden in plain sight. The truth had changed everything, not by creating drama, but by revealing the real story, allowing understanding, respect, and growth to flourish. Charlotte, walking past Kate's office, offered a small, appreciative smile. It was a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared and the lessons they had learned. Daniel, returning from his evening rounds, felt the quiet pride of knowing his work had made a difference. The three of them, in their own ways, had contributed to a story that was no longer about misunderstanding or assumption, but about clarity, courage, and the lasting power of truth. And so, the night that had once caused so much uncertainty had transformed into a lesson that would remain with them all, proof that careful observation, persistence, and honesty could change lives, influence perceptions, and create a culture of respect and understanding that would endure long into the future.